Be very careful if your dreams feel more vivid than your days, if you spend more time decoding symbols than speaking with people, if silence has become your native language and reality feels like an interruption to your inner world. You may not be escaping the world, you may be vanishing from it. And Carl Jung would have warned you that the danger isn't in being different, it's in being devoured. You see things. You don't always know how to explain them, but you feel them. Patterns, symbols, archetypes, like echoes rising from a deep place in your mind you've never consciously walked into. You're not looking at life from the outside, you're peering into its invisible structure. That's the gift of introverted intuition. But if you're not careful, if you don't anchor that gift, it can become the very thing that breaks you. Because you are not perceiving objects. You're not focusing on the material world the way others do. You're perceiving images, complex, emotional, symbolic truths. These are not thoughts in the logical sense. They are visions. And that's what makes your experience so powerful and so dangerous. You don't walk through life like others. You drift beneath it, observing its mythic subtext. You might say, you don't just see a tree, you see the entire cycle of death, rebirth, and decay within it. You don't just hear a word, you sense the archetype behind it. And that's where it begins. You are not just intuitive, you are introverted intuitive. Jung called this the most mysterious of all types, the rarest, the least understood, and the most susceptible to psychic disintegration. Why? Because your dominant function is pointed not at the world, but at the abyss beneath it. Introverted intuition is not soft, it's not dreamy, it's not about predicting what will happen next. It's about being constantly confronted by what is already happening beneath the surface, whether you like it or not. It's about being the lightning rod for unconscious material, for patterns others miss, for archetypes that emerge, whether you're ready or not. You know what I mean. You've had dreams that felt more real than reality. You've woken up and needed a minute to remember where you were. You've had ideas or inner images so overwhelming they stopped you in your tracks. That's the power of introverted intuition. But here's the truth Jung would want you to know. If you don't give that power a form, it will fragment you. Most people don't realize how dangerous it is to swim in the unconscious without a rope to the surface. But you do, because you've felt it. That pull into the symbolic realm. That desire to stay in your visions instead of returning to the ordinary. And why wouldn't you? The visions are beautiful, they're powerful, they make you feel alive. Until they don't. Because if you don't express those visions, if you don't paint them, write them, speak them, shape them, they begin to consume you. That's when fantasy stops being creative and starts becoming delusional. That's when you begin to believe you are the symbol, that you are the prophet, the chosen one, the martyr, the outcast. This is what Jung called archetypal inflation, and it's the greatest danger you face. It happens slowly. You start identifying not with your ego, your ordinary self, but with the enormous energy of the unconscious. You begin to feel like you've touched something sacred, and you have. But the moment you forget that you are merely the vessel, not the God, the descent begins. You start to believe that the vision chose you for a reason, that you have a message, a calling, a truth no one else can see, and maybe that's partly true. But if it's not anchored, if it's not lived, embodied, shared, processed, it becomes poison. It twists your perception. You see signs everywhere, meaning in everything, and soon you're no longer connected to reality. You're lost in a personal myth. You start to lose time. People don't understand you. Conversations feel shallow. You feel distant even from yourself. And what's worse, you think this is part of your growth. You think it's spiritual awakening, but it's not. It's disintegration. Jung saw this in his patients, those who stared too long into the abyss without integrating what they saw. They didn't become enlightened, they became consumed. The unconscious is not your friend. It's not your enemy either. It's a force of nature, and like any force of nature, it must be respected. Jung said that to relate to the unconscious without being swallowed by it, you must develop the ego, not to control it, but to act as a container, a strong enough structure to hold the fire without being burned alive. And here's where you have to make a choice. You can keep floating in your inner world. You can let the symbols swirl around your head, chasing meaning like smoke through a dream. Or you can bring it back. You can choose to ground the image, turn the dream into a story, turn the intuition into insight, make it real. Because your gift is not in seeing, it's in translating. You were never meant to stay in the dream. You were meant to bring something back from it. What use is a revelation if it doesn't change how you live, how you love, how you speak? You weren't meant to be a prisoner of your own perceptions. You were meant to be a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, between the seen and the unseen. And a bridge by its very nature must be grounded at both ends. Inner vision must meet outer form. Otherwise it becomes fantasy. Jung warned about this. He spoke of patients who had immense inner experiences, dreams, archetypes, epiphanies, but who never turned those insights into life. They would talk about the self, about the hero, about the anima or the wise old man, but they lived in confusion, in isolation, in psychic distress. They mistook knowing the symbol for becoming it, and they paid the price. Because the unconscious is not impressed by how many archetypes you can name, it wants to see whether you've changed, whether you've integrated the lesson, whether you've brought light to the shadow and truth to the lie. The shadow, yes, we need to talk about that. For you, the introverted intuitive, the shadow isn't loud. It doesn't appear in aggressive acts or overt power plays. It appears in subtle distortions, passive withdrawal, spiritual superiority, a false sense of insight that masks emotional avoidance. It shows up when you believe that your intuition exempts you from ordinary human work, setting boundaries, having hard conversations, staying grounded. But it doesn't. In fact, you need that work more than most, because you are vulnerable to splitting, living one life inside, another outside, appearing calm while drowning, saying nothing while screaming within, smiling politely while secretly feeling alien, distant, misplaced. That's psychic dissociation. And it creeps in when you stop giving your visions a place to land. Expression is not a luxury for you. It is a survival strategy. If you don't write, speak, paint, move, share, your inner world becomes a labyrinth, a hall of mirrors, and you lose track of what's real. You stop trusting your instincts. You begin to question yourself. Or worse, you stop questioning entirely, convinced your inner truth is infallible. This is where the fantasy becomes a fortress. You start rejecting others not because they don't see you, but because they reflect the parts of you you've abandoned. You say no one understands, but you haven't offered anything to be understood. You say you're isolated, but isolation has become your sanctuary. You say you don't care about the world, but deep down, you do. You just don't know how to bring your inner richness into it without being shattered. So instead, you retreat. But Jung warned that retreat, without return, is not growth. It is regression. Even myth tells us this. Every hero must go into the underworld, but every hero must come back. Think of Dante. He descends into hell, but he doesn't stay there. He brings the map back with him. Think of Persephone. She lives in the darkness part of the year, but returns with spring. Or Odysseus, forever pulled between the sirens of fantasy and the call of home. You too must return. But what does that look like in your life? It means risking imperfection. It means saying something out loud, even if it's not perfectly expressed. It means showing your vision in incomplete forms, starting a blog, painting something raw, journaling honestly, telling a friend about your dream instead of analyzing it alone. Because the vision must breathe. You're not here to prove your insight, you're here to live it. This is the paradox Jung saw clearly. The more you try to hold the inner image in its perfect form, the more distorted it becomes. The more you try to contain it in your head, the more it possesses you. But the moment you give it form, flawed, imperfect, vulnerable, it softens, it grounds, it becomes part of you, not your master. And this is individuation. This is the point of your function, not to live in the vision, but to grow from it, to walk with it into the world, to be changed by it, and to let others be changed too. So here's the question only you can answer. Are you willing to bring your inner world into the outer one? Are you willing to risk being misunderstood in order to stop misunderstanding yourself? Are you willing to give your images form, even if they tremble when they first stand? Because here's what you may not have realized yet. You are not fragile. You are deep. And depth is not weakness. Depth is pressure. It's the weight of meaning trying to find a voice. Let it speak. Let it stumble if it must. But let it out. Because the more you express your intuition, the more it stabilizes. The more you share the image, the less it overwhelms you. The more you connect, the more whole you become. That is the path Jung laid out for you, not a life of endless vision, but of living vision, not a mind full of symbols, but a soul that shapes them into something real. And in that shaping, you stop being just a receiver of meaning, you become its maker. Now, you might ask, but what if no one understands me? And the honest answer is, they won't, at least not all the way, but that was never the point. The purpose of expressing your inner world is not to be applauded, it's to make it real. It's to integrate what otherwise would float endlessly in the realm of the unspoken, the unformed. Integration is not about getting approval, it's about getting whole. Carl Jung wrote that the unconscious speaks in symbols, and that it is the task of consciousness to translate them into language, into image, into life. If you don't translate them, you stay divided. And here's where it gets subtle. You can be functional. You can go to work, pay your bills, hold conversations, and still be fractured inside. Still feel that unspoken grief. Still carry the weight of a meaning you haven't named yet. Because when the unconscious has something to say, it doesn't just whisper. It waits. It disrupts. It speaks through moods, through symptoms, through patterns you don't understand until you finally stop running and ask, "What do you want from me?" And when you ask, the answer often comes in image, in story, in metaphor, not in plain language. That's the nature of the intuitive mind. It doesn't download spreadsheets, it speaks in dreams, but it's your job to translate. This is where the responsibility lies for you. You've been given access to something most people never see. You can feel meaning before it appears. You can sense what's coming before anyone names it. You might even think that you were born in the wrong time or the wrong world. But Jung would say, no, you were born with a specific task, to bring the inner world closer to the outer one, to act as a conduit. And that means cultivating not just insight, but structure. This is the hard part. You have to ground. You have to create rituals, habits, containers for the intuitive fire you carry, because that fire can light a path or burn your life down. Some of the most gifted people you'll ever meet are intuitive dominants, and some of the most self-destructive people you'll ever meet are too. The difference is expression. The difference is whether they took their inner world and gave it roots. That's the work. And yes, it is work. You'll want to avoid it. You'll want to retreat into your dream world, into your private meanings. You'll tell yourself no one gets it anyway, that it's safer to stay silent, that the world doesn't deserve what you have to say. But that's a trick of the shadow. That's not wisdom. That's fear in disguise. The more you hide, the more power the image gains. It doesn't go away. It waits. And then it reappears, louder, in your relationships, in your anxieties, in your confusion about why you feel disconnected even when everything seems fine. You are not here to escape the world, you are here to re-enchant it. That means doing things that feel awkward. It means translating your symbolic language into something others can feel, even if they don't fully understand it. A poem, a painting, a moment of real vulnerability in a conversation, letting someone see behind the mask of insight. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be true. And when you do that, something changes. Not just in you, but in the people around you. You give them permission to go deeper. You invite them into a level of reality they didn't know they were starving for. And suddenly your vision isn't a burden. It's a bridge. But there's more. We have to talk about loneliness. Because it's part of your path. Not forever, but for a time. Jung warned that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is not a path for the faint of heart. It's a descent into solitude, into confrontation with the parts of you that no one applauds, the parts that don't fit, that ache, that scare you. And for the intuitive type, that solitude is often filled with visions, with symbols, with dreams that feel more real than life. You might think this means you're broken, that you're disconnected, but you're not. You're in transition. You are in the underworld, and in myth, that's where every transformation begins. But don't forget, every descent is meant to be followed by a return. You are not meant to live in the underworld. You're meant to bring something back from it, a truth, a story, a piece of yourself that had been buried. And when you do return, you'll be different. Not louder, not more extroverted, not suddenly conventional, but grounded, able to hold the vision without being overwhelmed by it, able to speak without needing to be understood, able to stand in your truth without needing others to agree. That's the real power of your function, not just what you see, but who you become because of it. A person with depth, with clarity, with presence. Someone who no longer fears the darkness, because you've walked through it and found light. Not the kind of light that blinds, the kind that guides. You probably already know this, but let me remind you, not everyone is meant to understand you, not everyone is supposed to, and chasing that understanding from people who don't even know how to understand themselves will only drain you. The point is not to be understood by everyone. The point is to understand yourself so deeply that you no longer need the world's reflection to feel real. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what he didn't say as often, because it was already implied, is that becoming who you are is terrifying, because it means losing who you thought you had to be. For the introverted intuitive, this is especially true, because your whole identity has been shaped, often quietly and invisibly, by the tension between your inner knowing and the outer world's misunderstanding of it. You've probably felt like the outsider most of your life, not in a dramatic way, more in the quiet sense that you just didn't quite fit, that people seemed to be playing a game you weren't interested in, that conversations skimmed the surface when you wanted to dive deep, that while everyone else was busy talking, you were busy noticing, sensing, absorbing what wasn't being said. This sensitivity is not a flaw, it's not even just a trait, it's a compass. But if you ignore it, or suppress it, or treat it like an inconvenience, it will turn against you. It will become anxiety, dissociation, restlessness, a longing for a life you can't name but can always feel pressing just beyond your reach. That's the unconscious calling you, not with answers, with questions, with tension, with symbols that won't leave you alone until you respond. The question is, will you answer? Not with words, with action, with form, with expression. Will you meet the symbol halfway? Because that's how integration works. Not by controlling the unconscious, not by ignoring it, but by dialoguing with it, respecting it, giving it shape. That's when you stop being its hostage and start becoming its translator. And that role, translator of the unconscious, is sacred. You are not just intuitive for the sake of insight. You are intuitive because something inside you is wired to bridge the personal and the collective, the conscious and the unseen. And the world needs that. Now more than ever, we are drowning in information, but starved for meaning. You can feel that. You've probably always felt that. And maybe you thought it was your burden. But it's not, it's your calling. You are here to bring depth back into a shallow world, but you cannot do that if you don't first go deep into yourself, and not just once, over and over. This is a lifelong process. Jung called it individuation. It's not about perfection, it's about wholeness. It's not about becoming someone else, it's about reclaiming who you've always been, beneath the masks, the roles, the expectations. And for you, individuation means learning to trust your visions without being controlled by them. It means recognizing when you are inflating, when you are withdrawing, when you are spiritualizing your pain instead of healing it. It means learning to distinguish between a genuine calling and a psychic complex that just knows how to speak in religious language. Because yes, your mind is wired for myth. That's the blessing and the curse. You see meaning where others see chaos. You sense patterns long before they emerge. But that also means you can project divinity onto dysfunction. You can see cosmic purpose in personal avoidance. You can justify staying stuck because you believe the pain is part of some greater symbolic purpose. And maybe it is. But symbolic insight doesn't replace emotional responsibility. You still have to do the work. You still have to show up. This is where the path of the introverted intuitive becomes razor sharp. Because you can fool others, you can even fool yourself, but you cannot fool the unconscious. It will keep pressing, keep manifesting in your dreams, your behaviors, your relationships, until you finally stop theorizing and start living what you claim to believe. That's the integration Jung spoke of, not knowing the self as a concept, but living as though your wholeness mattered more than your image. You don't need to be extraordinary. You don't need to be a guru. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be honest. Honest about where you are. Honest about what you feel. Honest about what you've avoided because it scared you. That's how the inner world starts to settle. That's how the psychic chaos starts to calm. Through honesty, through embodiment, through living a life that reflects your inner depth instead of just thinking about it. Because at the end of the day, the danger of introverted intuition isn't that you're too deep. It's that your depth goes unused, that your symbolic insight stays locked in your mind, that your intuition remains a secret you never share, that your life becomes a rehearsal for a performance you never give. That is what Jung warned against. Not the vision, but the refusal to bring it into life. So let me say it plainly. Your task is not to escape the world. Your task is to enter it fully, not in spite of your visions, but because of them. You are not here to disappear. You are here to embody, and that means showing up with all your complexity, with all your inner contradictions, with all the symbols you've carried for years and never dared to speak out loud. Now is the time. Not when it's perfect, not when it's safe. Now. Because every day you delay is another day the vision remains a ghost. You were not born to be haunted by your own insight. You were born to give it life. And yes, there will be resistance, from within and from the world around you. Some people won't want you to change. They've grown comfortable with your silence, with your ambiguity, with your spiritual distance. They may even romanticize your quiet depth, not realizing how much it costs you to keep it hidden. But you're not here to be a fantasy. You're here to be real. And real means confronting things you've spent years avoiding. It means saying the thing, writing the thing, creating the thing, living the thing that feels too vulnerable, too strange, too raw to share. Jung often warned that the more we resist something in the unconscious, the more it controls us. It doesn't disappear, it waits. It finds other ways to speak, through sabotage, through projection, through emotional collapse. So if you've felt yourself circling the same problems again and again, relationships that drain you, creative blocks, an overwhelming sense of alienation, that's not random. That's feedback. That's the psyche demanding integration. Not more insight, not more analysis, more action, more embodiment. And here's the thing most people never tell you about introverted intuition. It's not just about deep perception. It's about being called. And a calling doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It doesn't wait for you to finish your spiritual homework. It burns, it aches, it drags you to the edge of yourself and says, choose. Choose silence or truth. Choose comfort or clarity. Choose fantasy or life. The script, this message. It's not about blaming you. It's about awakening you, because there is so much potential in you, not theoretical potential, real, tangible, world-shifting potential. But only if you act on it, only if you choose to leave the inner temple and walk barefoot into the world. You can bring your sacredness with you. You don't have to leave that behind. But you do have to leave the illusion that staying hidden will somehow protect it. It will. Staying hidden is what suffocates it. Expression isn't about proving anything, it's about circulation. Psychic energy must move. If it doesn't, it stagnates, it festers, it turns against itself. You've probably felt that. How when you ignore your creativity, it turns into anxiety. How when you deny your symbolic insights, they start to feel like burdens instead of blessings. That's not a flaw in you, that's a law of psyche. What doesn't get expressed gets repressed, and what gets repressed eventually erupts. But when you speak, when you act, when you begin to bring form to the formless, something shifts. Your intuition starts to work with you, not against you. Your inner world becomes a source of strength, not struggle. Your sense of meaning deepens, not because everything is clear, but because you've finally committed to the path. Because that's what it takes, commitment. Not to a fixed identity, but to a process. The process of becoming whole. The process of returning to yourself again and again. Of reinterpreting your symbols, not clinging to them. Of being humble enough to admit when an image you once thought was sacred was really just a mask. That's the difference between the inflated intuitive and the integrated one. One seeks to feel special, the other seeks to be true. And if you're listening to this, if you're still here, I know which one you want to be. You don't want to be a spiritual performer. You don't want to be an oracle on a pedestal. You want to live. You want to feel connected. You want to build something real out of what you've seen. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Jung said that the psychological truth is always paradoxical, and here's your paradox. The more you embrace your ordinariness, the more powerful your intuition becomes. The more you engage with the real world, the more insight the symbolic world will offer you. Because the psyche respects integration, it rewards the one who walks the talk. Not perfectly, but earnestly. So here is where you are now, at the edge of what you've imagined and what you've lived, 1 foot in the myth, 1 foot in the moment. You don't have to abandon your vision, but you do have to embody it. The symbol must become form. The dream must become structure. The insight must become relationship, behavior, commitment, risk. Risk, yes. This is the word that often haunts the intuitive. Risk feels foreign, unsafe, dangerous, and it is, because it means stepping into the unknown, without a map, without certainty, without control. But you of all people should understand that the unknown is not the enemy, it's the origin, it's where your insights come from, where your creativity is born. You just have to meet it halfway. So take the risk. Speak the truth, start the project, end the illusion, step out of the role you've been hiding in and become the one who chooses to live fully. That's what this function, introverted intuition, was always meant to do. Not to isolate you, to initiate you into a life that reflects the depth you've carried all along. This is what Jung saw so clearly. And what most of the world still fails to grasp, the intuitive's journey isn't one of escape, it's a descent and a return. The descent into the unconscious, into the world of symbols, archetypes, prophetic dreams, and numinous images. That's only half the story. The return is where the real transformation happens. The return is what separates the mystic from the delusional, the healer from the wounded wanderer, the artist from the fantasist, because only in the return does the vision become a gift and not a burden. And yet, the return is the hardest part, because it means leaving the comfort of what only you can see and stepping into a world that may not recognize any of it. It means risking misunderstanding, rejection, indifference. It means saying, "This is what I've seen," and bracing for silence. But you must do it anyway, because that is what makes you real. That is what makes you alive. To live with intuition is to live with tension. The tension between what you know internally and what the world seems to expect. The tension between depth and function, soul and schedule, transcendence and grounding. And yet, that tension is not a flaw. It's the crucible of your individuation, the place where your soul is forged. If you run from it, you stay fractured. But if you stand inside it, something new is born, something stronger than the image, stronger than the dream, you. Because individuation isn't about becoming the vision, it's about becoming the person who can hold it, speak it, live it, without being swallowed by it. That's why Jung placed so much emphasis on integration, not just insight, not just depth, integration, where the symbolic meets the embodied, where the spiritual meets the psychological, where the archetype becomes the action. That's when your intuition stops being a storm and starts becoming a compass. You will still feel different, but not alien. You will still walk alone sometimes, but not in exile. You will still be drawn to the mystery, but you'll bring a lantern this time. Not because you need to see everything, but because you've accepted that darkness is not the enemy. Only unconsciousness is. Only the refusal to engage with what you know is waiting inside you. So here's what I want you to take from this. Your inner world is valid. Your visions are real. Your insight is profound. But none of it matters if it never meets the light of day. None of it matters if it stays trapped inside you. You were not born to collect symbols like trophies. You were born to translate them, to give them breath, to speak them into being. Not because the world deserves your vision, but because your soul does. You owe it to yourself to live what you know, not to impress, not to be special, to be whole. That is the promise and the peril of introverted intuition. It can lead you into madness or maturity. It can fragment you or fortify you. It all depends on whether you choose to remain a watcher of symbols or become a walker of truth. And maybe that's what's been calling to you all along, not just a desire to understand, but a deeper instinct, the pull to become. To not just dream of the mountain, but to climb it. To not just see the river, but to step into it. To not just analyze the map, but to take the journey. You don't need permission, you need presence. You don't need to be perfect. You need to participate. You don't need every answer. You just need to stop pretending you don't already know what needs to come next. So take the next step, the smallest one. Open the sketchbook. Write the first line. Speak the truth you've been rehearsing in your head for years. Let the vision have a voice. Let the symbol walk. Let your intuition at last become incarnation. Because the dream must live. And so must you.